Welcome to the Rock and Roll Show podcast. We're here to share the thrill of experiencing music of all kinds together with strangers and with friends, and to get to know our guests a little bit better through their musical experiences. I'm your host, Alex Gadd, and I do this because I love talking about music with people. Finding out what bands someone likes and how they got into music allows us to get to know and understand one another better. And today we're lucky to have Scott Greenblatt as our guest. Scott is a musician and a studio engineer. He's recorded and released a solo album in 2021 titled Where I Left Off, and he's toured the country supporting Matt Carney and Mark Sibilia. He's also worked in a few recording studios, including the world famous Electric Lady Studios in New York City. These days, he makes his home in Music City, Nashville, Tennessee, and he works with Mark Sibilia, helping to engineer his recordings and produce social media content for him. I'm looking forward to a wide ranging conversation. So without further ado, Scott, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Can't wait to chat with you.
Yeah, right on. Let's start in honor of you by putting a bev in play, and then we can start the conversation.
Put the bev in play, and I put a bev in play.
Put the bev in play.
Put the bev in play. Then I went home and put my very last bev in play. Cheers.
Cheers. All right. I like to start conversations by finding out how you got into music in the first place.
Well, like a lot of people, music was playing in my house from a very young age. So my parents put me on to classic rock and all the stuff that they grew up with. And then I started playing piano when I was around 6 years old, and I sort of just caught the bug, sounding songs out that I heard on the radio or on my MP3 player at the time. And it was a slippery slope from there. I got into music production in high school. I played in bands. I got into engineering in college, and now I'm somehow still doing the thing.
That's great. What type of music or types of music did you gravitate towards early on? I know your dad. We went to high school together,
Yeah,
and I just met your mom this year at a Foo Fighters concert. You have absolutely lovely parents who are very cool.
I agree.
But
Thank
I'm
you.
sure they turned you on to music. What types of music did you gravitate towards first?
Yeah, they definitely did. I would say they showed us like a wide variety of music. Some of my favorites that I gravitated towards when I was a little kid were uh, Bruce Springsteen, U2, Green Day. For whatever reason, I really liked those two bands. I was going to say my parents didn't really put their thumb on the scale when it came to showing us music, but like being from New Jersey, there definitely was a heavy dose of Springsteen. Yeah, I really liked those classic rock groups. When I got older, when I got to college, I got pretty into Grateful Dead. I had listened to them before with my dad, but I didn't really gain a full appreciation until I got a little bit older.
Hmm.
Um, but it was a lot of classic rock that I gravitated towards. And then a lot of the later discoveries that I made on my own were like jazz and fusion and indie R&B stuff.
Yeah, I listened to your album and
Thank
it's
you.
got a lot of other flavors in it. It's not really a rock and roll record. It's more like a jazz pop rock record. It's got a lot of flavors. So we'll talk
Yeah,
more about that, but it's interesting
for sure.
that you found that on your own. And so your first favorite band,
I really remember loving U2.
okay?
U2 and Green Day were probably tied. Those were some of the first shows that I ever saw. The first actual concert that I saw, I feel like there was probably a time when I was embarrassed to say this, but now I'm like super proud. The American Idol top 10 finalist, whatever season, it was like Daughtry and
So
Taylor.
did Daughtry win that year? Didn't he come in like third?
Some guy Taylor Hicks won, and I don't think
Yes.
his career has had all that much longevity. But it's just kind of a hilarious first concert, I think. But then a little bit later on, I saw Bruce and U2 in the same year, and those were I think I was like in fifth grade maybe. Those were easily some of the best concerts I went to, and they're like numbers 2 and 3 or something. So it started off set the bar pretty high.
That's a good way to start off.
Yeah.
So, my first concert was the Village People, and then I
Oh,
saw
cool.
Bruce. That's my second concert was Bruce also. So,
That's
I'm right
hilarious.
there with you with goofy concerts that I'm proud of now, but I was embarrassed about earlier.
Yeah,
So, you said you started playing piano at around 6, and you have a twin sister, am I correct?
I do. Yep.
Did you both play?
Yeah, we both started lessons around the
Okay,
same time. It was kind of just like an after school activity. And I think we both liked to play. But the way that my mom says, at least, is like she never had to ask me to practice. So it was kind of just like I would come home from school, I'd decompress, I'd figure stuff out. And I think for my sister, it might have been a little bit more of a chore. I don't want to speak for her, but at
sure.
some point, I ended up just going a little bit further than she did.
That's fair. I mean, most kids that take piano lessons go in a different direction.
Yeah, those are the odds, but she was doing gymnastics, and this was really my main thing, and then I remember when I was, like, 10 years old, or I think it was 10, a lot of my friends for their birthdays were getting, like, electric guitars, and that was just, like, the cool thing, and I had never played guitar, and I sort of thought, like, "What if I got a keyboard? That's kind of lame, like, why would I just get a keyboard?" And my mom was like, "No, that's a great idea, you should." And then I was able to play piano and put headphones in, and she wouldn't hear me banging on
Right,
the keys all the time, so
right. So before that keyboard, did you have a piano in the house?
we did, yeah, we had a Lester apartment baby grand piano. It's like this brown piano. My parents still have it, it's in storage right now, and I'm hoping that I'll reunite with it one day, but, it's sort of I don't wanna call it crappy because it's like a beautiful sound, but it's a very unique, janky sort of piano. There are just some good memories with it. One time we we had to make some sort of repair, and my dad went on YouTube. He was like, "I think we can figure this out instead of hiring somebody." We took the action out of the piano and got pretty far. It was because like one of the keys was like depressed a little bit lower than the
Right.
other ones. And we almost got it with no problems. And then I remember shoving it back into the piano. There was like a cracking sound, and I still sort of
Oh,
like flinch at that, Mary. But we were
yeah, I
able
can
to
imagine.
repair it. I like that my dad was game to try to figure it out. So yeah, that's that
Did
piano that
you
I sort of learned how to play on.
you should get it back into your life as soon as possible and get it out of storage.
Yeah.
Now, did you have a moment, an aha moment where you said, "Oh, this is the thing for me," or did it just kind of evolve that way?
That's a good question. I think that moment, I do think it's like a series of moments that sort of just like snowballed over time. But I do remember one specific instance where I was at summer camp, and that's where I learned how to like really jam with people. There was a music shed, and I would hang out in there a lot. And I remember one time being in there with a group of friends and sort of learning, like teaching myself, or just coming to a realization. It's like, oh, this scale or these set of notes, you can play them in a random order on top of this chord. That sounds super cool. And that was my first, it was like a C blues scale and playing that on top of just a C minor chord. And I think in that moment, it was a liberating feeling. Like I'm making decisions. I'm expressing myself through music. And suddenly I was able to express things musically. I wasn't just regurgitating the music that your piano teacher teaches you how to play. And
Right.
I always sort of learned more by ear than by reading. I didn't really come from a classical background. And then I got more into jazz and stuff in high school.
How did that happen?
I got connected through my high school chorus teacher. He said he had an old student, this guy named Dan Ruffalo, and he was just like an incredible jazz piano player. He was back in town looking for students, and I was doing some accompanying of the chorus at that point. Long story short, he linked me with this guy, and he just sort of ended up becoming a mentor for me. And I really got a foundation in jazz after that, which totally opened up my world as a musician because I was able to apply a lot of the theory stuff that I was learning in jazz to pop music and
Mhm.
uh, R&B and just like more commercial stuff. So I got really into music theory. I'm a pretty big music theory nut. I just like understanding why things work in music.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've learned music theory on a need to know basis. I play guitar, as you
Yeah.
might see behind me,
Uh-huh.
and I'm not great. I'm nowhere near where you are. I play in cover bands, and for me,
Cool.
that's enough. You know, for everyone, it's different. And for me, that's been enough to unlock all the joy that I need out of music. But I recognize that there is an incredible value in doing that. I just haven't done it yet. And I've got time, I think.
It's really just like a language that the more proficient, the more fluent you are in it, the better you can communicate with other musicians and maybe articulate why something sounds a certain way or how you can make something sound a certain way. But the flip side of that is it can almost box you in a certain way because the rules are there so you can break them. But
Mhm.
if you know music theory and you're like, oh, that note doesn't work in this chord because it's a sharp 11, like anyone who doesn't know music theory has no idea about that. Maybe you're just thinking, oh, that sounds cool. So it's sort of like I like to know it because I like to understand why things sound certain ways. But
Sure.
I try not to get too boxed into like the music theory of it all.
From my experience, the best musicians understand theory so that they never have to think about it. And I think that's what you're saying is that there's an underlying understanding that gives you the confidence to branch out and express
Totally.
whatever you're feeling in that moment. What you said first really speaks to that uh, playing with other musicians
Yep.
is a conversation. And instead of just following along, it allows you to express your thoughts and your feelings and how you're reacting to what's being played and that it's endlessly fascinating. So it is interesting to me that there are just 12 notes and yet
Right.
unlimited number of ways to express those notes together.
It's so cool. I'll learn a new shape or I'll be like playing a chord progression and I sort of gravitate towards that. But then I'll discover a weird pattern. I still love finding those new things.
I don't think that ends. I
Yeah, I
hope
hope it
hopefully
doesn't.
it doesn't, right?
But going back to the original question that you asked, I think that the that experience of jamming with people and learning that I could solo and play whatever I want spontaneously, improvisationally, that was sort of like an aha moment that I had that really kind of lit a fire under my ass.
Speaking of which, you said you played in bands in high school. Do you
Mhm.
remember and can you tell us anything about your first band?
Absolutely, yeah. My first band was in 4th grade, with 2 of my neighbor friends. Shout out to Chris Heckelman and Casey Shoemaker. We were called Red Horizon. We played one hit gig at the block party, and then I think we may have done 2 others after that. We played some talent shows. We wrote a few songs, and my parents always poke fun at me because we had, like, 2 songs, 2 original songs that we played at the block party, and, I was the person with the microphone, and I was like, "This is the first song that we ever wrote." And then the second song that I played, I was like, "Alright, this is our new song." And my parents think that's the funniest thing ever because we didn't have much material to work with.
This is our new song.
They helped me lug my keyboard up the hill to the block party. So yeah, that was the first band that I was in. In high school, I got together with a group of friends. This was sort of like a once a year thing. It was all the top jazz cats basically, and we would do like one gig at the end of each year. We called ourselves the Groove Collective. I still love all these guys. We were in all different years of high school, all a few years apart from each other, but we would do everything from jazz standards to Stevie Wonder to more modern pop stuff. I remember doing a Charlie Puth song and um
Another New
yeah,
Jersey guy.
yeah, exactly. Shout out to New Jersey. I can't remember the full set list that we would do, but it was just a lot of R&B fusion type stuff. So that was in high
Cool.
school. And then when I was in college, I played in a few bands, and that was a whole nother educational experience outside of the classroom, really learning how the inner workings of being in a band works. Was fortunate enough to get to play some gigs on both coasts and played a ton of house parties. And I played with an artist named Julia Goodwin, who I still play with down here in Nashville. She's one of the friends that sort of convinced me to move here. And then the other band that I played in college was called No New Friends.
Are you mine? 'Cause I can't read your mind. Don't take your time. It's in between those white lines, calling all your name and all your white lies. Like pockets full of change, but I think sometimes you don't know you've changed. 2, 3. Walking on the floor, I can't
And you say that you played outside of the campus arena, you actually went on the road with that band?
Yeah, we had a pretty hopeful future with Nona Friends. It's sort of the cliche, it's like, we're not like other bands, and then we ended up being like other bands. It was looking good for a minute. We played for, basically a year outside of school. We played shows in New York City, we had a gig in LA at Hotel Cafe. I think we got up to, like, 250 person rooms, maybe it was a little bit bigger, but the thing that I always loved about being in a college band was that it's like an incubator
Mhm,
for a
mhm.
fan base. It's a captive audience, basically. There's only so many people on campus, only so many bands, only so many things to do, and in the underground music scene, we were able to sort of cultivate a bit of a following, and it was really fun, really exciting, like, from the time I was a sophomore to my 5th year at school when I was in grad school, we grew a following and played a ton of house shows and just all over the Syracuse area. We did all originals. Well, we also played, like, when we were doing house parties, we definitely threw in some
Oh, sure,
covers
just
that
yeah,
could get the
that's just
crowd moving.
yeah.
But yeah, we recorded a lot throughout college. Actually, when COVID hit, one of the pros was that everybody was in off-campus houses at that point, and we sort of set up and would do these benchmark recording sessions. So we'd be practicing once or twice a week, and then 2 producer friends of the band would come up to school, set up their whole recording rig in the house, and we would set up in a living room, record 4 songs in 2 or 3 days. A lot of those songs never saw the light of day, but we did end up putting an EP out. I think there's something like 10 or 12 songs that got released throughout the whole band's active existence. And you can still listen to them. And I still love those songs. And it's sort of a time capsule. I would say the same thing about my solo project. It's definitely representative of the music I was making at that time. And I'm still proud of it. But sounds evolve. And I do feel fortunate that I have those songs to look back on from that time in college, and then also just me as a musician, it's sort of a benchmark to see how far I've grown.
I can imagine. I wrote crappy songs that I've never recorded, and I'm proud of them. So, I can imagine if you wrote good songs that actually were played out and appreciated, that that would feel pretty good.
Yeah, it's cool. I will say though, I also have written a ton of songs that I've never recorded. The first song that I ever wrote, I was 3 years old, and it was called I Need to Show You What It's All About," and that was basically all the lyrics, and never recorded
Well, hey, th you still time.
it.
When you were during COVID and lockdown, a lot of people did a lot of very creative things. Is that when you caught the bug to get into the engineering side and the recording side of it, or had you already been involved in that?
This is a good question. It was a little bit earlier. It was before COVID. Everybody was still in person, but I was recording with my band. We were in the studio, and there was one specific session where it was just like a dysfunctional engineer. He wasn't able to answer our questions. Basically, 3 out of the 4 hours of our time were setting up and problem solving, and a little light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, if somebody in the band is able to fill that role, fill that seat, we would probably solve a lot of problems and save a lot of time. And then I said, okay, what if I just tried taking a crack at engineering stuff? I was already into producing at that point, and it was like a snowball. I kept asking questions also with the engineer who I was working with on my project. And then next thing I knew, I was in the studio sitting behind the console and sort of just wearing that hat.
I've sat in a studio in a recording session and not even being the engineer, but just being involved is exciting.
Yeah, it's super cool. And another thing that I realized sort of early on, even before college, I thought about this in high school. I just didn't know how it would manifest itself. I've always known that I wanted to do something in music. I just didn't know what that would look like. But I figured that the wider of a net that I cast, the more likely I will be to succeed in this industry. So I started getting more into engineering. I started doing production so that I could help out other people's projects. I still love being a keyboard player, and that's how I would identify above all else.
Okay.
But being able to just have a varied skill set in the music industry, I feel protects your job security.
It does. The interesting thing in any profession is being a jack of all trades is great, but at some point you become a recording musician or you become an engineer that does recordings on the side. It's fascinating to be talking to you now, and I hope we get to revisit where you end up But
Yeah.
I don't think there's a final stop. You end up doing the next thing and then the next thing.
Yep.
And hopefully you get to follow as many of your muses as you can.
That's the goal. I mean, ever since I moved down to Nashville, it's been yes, yes, yes. I want to learn what it's like to be on a tour. I want to learn what it's like to assist in a studio and do all these different things. And at the end of the day, some of the tasks that I'm doing aren't my dedicated passion, but it's something that I know how to do. And when somebody else reaches out to me and says they want to film something for a day, to me, that's just like a gig and it's an opportunity and it could lead to something else. That's sort of my mentality when I'm saying yes or no to these sorts of gigs.
Yeah, I think that's great, and that's part of being young, and
Oh,
having
totally.
multiple opportunities is not trying to box yourself in, but trying to expose yourself to as many things as you can. And it's not just about the task, it's about the people that you do those tasks with or for. So I
Yep.
think you're doing the right thing. There's plenty of time to whittle it down to one or two things. But I do want to ask just one more question about your music and the songs you've written.
Sure.
Did any songs break out? Do you have a hit song? Is there a song that's been played on the radio repeatedly or gotten into the public consciousness more than the others?
Yeah, for the Scott Greenblatt solo project, nothing on a crazy scale at all, but I wrote one song in college that was I think it was the first single that I put out on the project, which was called The Other Night. The feelings that I feel, I'm wondering if they're real, but I know it felt alright the other night. The other night. And my band played that a ton in school. And sort of in that same note that I had about like the cult following, you cultivate a following on campus. People knew that song, and that was sort of part of our set list. I wouldn't say it's a regret that I have, but I do wish a little bit that the band ended up recording that song because I think that it potentially could have gone a little bit farther. But similar comment to before, I'm happy that I just have that almost as a time capsule of who I was. And so that's the most traction song that I've singularly written has gotten. I've since produced and co-written on some songs that have done pretty well, but for a Scott Greenblatt song, that song The Other Night is probably the most successful one. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm going to give that a second listen.
check it out. Yeah.
What other songs have you worked on that have gone wider?
So I started assisting this guy, Mark Sibilia, and the last year I've been all over his songs, and we can talk about that for sure, but more of just the freelance stuff that I've been doing. Most recently, I've been working with an artist who's based in Ireland, this guy named Oren Murphy, and I've been co-producing and mixing stuff for him. I think the top song that I've worked on with him has over 3 million streams on Spotify.
Woo!
It's called Limitless Love. So that's more wearing like the producer hat than the co-write hat. But it's cool to see that something that I touched has reached a lot of people. And that's starting to
Sure.
happen a little bit more now, which is exciting.
That is exciting. And about your music, have you ever gotten a check for your music? Any royalty payments?
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, that was a great learning experience in college. Um, a little music industry knowledge if people are interested in this. There's something called the Nashville split. I don't know if I'm just preaching to the choir, if this is new.
No, no, no. I want to hear it. I don't know that one.
So basically, like, it's not just in Nashville. I just think that because there's such an industry here, this is like the standard, and maybe it started in Nashville. If there are four people in a room and I write the verse and you write the chorus and Joe contributes one word to the second verse and Lindsay says three lines in the bridge or whatever. It's 25, 25, 25, 25 because we all contributed to it. So everybody splits the royalties evenly. But that's not always standard. Sometimes it's, oh, well, I wrote the whole verse and Joe only did one word, so I should be getting more. So anyway, it was a bit of a lesson in college because when we were writing these songs in the band, we never really had that discussion because we were just kids making music and didn't think about royalties or anything. So it was like the last year of college. And I remember sitting down in the living room with the band and everyone was just like nickeling and diming for, well, you wrote that line in this chorus and I wrote and I really was not a fan of that process because I was like, this takes the joy out of creating, because next time we go to write a song, someone's going to shut my idea down or vice versa because I want that extra percentage point. And that's
Right.
I'm a fan of the Nashville mentality because
Mhm.
if you contributed to it, then you get a royalty. But I'm not sure if I totally answered your question. If I've ever gotten a check, I have gotten money, a little bit of money now, nothing that can support me entirely.
I just I'm curious if your first check was a check or was it just a transfer of digital funds?
There's services now that make it pretty easy. One of them is called DistroKid, and it's basically just a distributor. So if I finish recording the song, it's been mixed, it's been mastered, you can't just upload it to Spotify like a Facebook post or like SoundCloud. It has to go through a distributor and they push it out to all the stores, Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, whatever. And DistroKid handles collecting all of the royalties and stuff like that. So if I have percentage points as a co-writer or as a producer, it will automatically get added to like my bank. And
Mhm.
over time, I get a 5%, 5 percentage points on a song here, three on a song there, 15, whatever. That adds up. And I've looked at my DistroKid bank and I'm like, oh, cool. This is more than just 7 cents now.
Right.
Still probably need some other jobs. Can't just pay rent with royalties, but maybe one day.
Yeah, one. I have faith.
Thanks.
Okay, what's your favorite venue that you've ever played as a musician?
That's a good question. Favorite venue that I've ever played in New York, I really liked playing at the Sultan Room, which is a venue in Brooklyn.
Why
I,
did you like that place in particular?
it's just kind of a cool vibe. They've got a really cool stage and cool LED lights behind. I also remember playing this venue in DC called the Pie Shop, which was pretty cool. I think it's sort of just a club-sized room above a pie shop, and it was sort of a vibe. So that, yeah, New York and DC.
I've seen through your social media that you drive all over the center of the country. You've driven up to St. Louis to play music and
Yep.
other places just for a night to support one of your colleagues or friends. Yeah.
Yeah, it's honestly something I'm still getting used to being in Nashville. Because when a buddy of mine, this artist named Eli Ward, reached out and asked if I wanted to play in St. Louis, I was like, St. Louis, that's far from the East Coast. And then, oh, wait, I'm in Tennessee. And it
Right.
ended up being probably like a 4 hour drive, pretty manageable. We played at a venue there called The Garage, which was interesting, but pretty good turnout. And yeah, it's one of my goals. I just want to travel the world by way of music. And if there's an opportunity to experience something or a place that I've never been to, and music is the thing that's taking me there, I'm almost always going to be in.
All right. Have you done any formal study to become an engineer? Or has it all been circumstantial and experiential?
Both. I actually do have a degree. I got a master's degree in audio arts. Part of the whole COVID thing with my university, I went to Syracuse.
Mhm.
They incentivized the graduating class to stick around with half off tuition for grad school. And my band at the time was all a year younger than me. And I was sort of robbed out of my last year, which senior year. And I turned to my parents and asked what they thought about me doing this program, get another degree, get to play with my band, get another year of school. And they're like, go for it, which I am eternally grateful for because I got this studio experience that I never would have had. Part of that required me to get an internship at the end of the program. And that's how I landed at Electric Lady. And everything sort of, it's just like a domino effect. I got the degree. And honestly, ever since I got the degree, nobody in music has asked for a resume or anything like that, but it really is just about world experience and studio etiquette. I definitely learned things about signal flow and engineering, but all the stuff that I learned about how to just be in a room and how to be a good engineer and how to get ideas out of people and how to get good sounds out of instruments and mics, most of that stuff has been in the field.
Yeah, I saw another social media post you had to prove or you had to do a test on your first day to show what you knew as an engineer.
Yeah, that was Andrew Masters. He is a YouTube guy who does all this engineering and production recording studio content. And I worked with him for about half a year. And yeah, he featured me on his page a couple times. And that was fun.
He seems super cool.
Yeah,
and supportive of you. So that was nice.
he's a cool guy, and it's another one of those domino effect. It's a full circle thing where I actually discovered Mark Sibilia, the guy who I currently work for, through Andrew's YouTube page. When I was first checking out Nashville, I was using his page basically as a search engine, just because he had so many videos with Nashville artists and engineers and producers. And when I wanted to network with people, I just didn't know where else to go. So I looked up everybody on his page and reached out. And Mark was one of the people who replied. I ended up getting connected with Andrew Masters another way, but long story short, he ended up reaching out to me because of the work that he saw that I was doing with Mark. And then I ended up being his video editor and assistant for a little bit. Yeah, it's funny. It's all connected. And when you sort of zoom out, you start to see how the chain of events all relate
Mhm.
to each other.
That is pretty cool that Nashville is that kind of a community where things flow from one to the next.
Agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about Mark and your work with him a little bit because that's someone who I discovered on TikTok in March, maybe March or April. And it mostly, from what I remember, those early videos that I saw were him recording loops that he built into cover songs of popular songs. Were you involved in making those videos?
Yeah. So I started working with Mark as an intern in May of 2023, over a year ago now. And that very quickly sort of developed into more of an assistant role. Um, I was still helping take out the trash and clean the studio and do all of that. But he also saw that I could do video editing and I am a musician and I have background in production and engineering. And my goal was to sort of just make myself indispensable by doing as many different things as I could. And eventually I started helping out more within the creative process and those loop videos, like you said.
1, 2, 3, 4. We found love in a hopeless place. We found love in a hopeless place. We found love in a hopeless place.
That's what got a lot of traction at first. And we started to see like a pattern coming up with the best songs, the biggest, the most popular things, and how we could sort of reimagine it. So a lot of what I would do would help build out the loop, map it out before we filmed it. What if we recorded this keyboard part here? What if you tried this or whatever? Sometimes I would even like temp in a vocal thing that he would go in and replace. Obviously, he's the one doing everything in the video, but there's a lot of planning that goes into it
Oh,
before.
yeah, it appears like there's a lot of planning. It's very choreographed and
Yeah.
not in a bad way. I don't think you could do those types of videos if you
Yeah.
weren't
You got to have a plan.
prepared. Yeah, you got to
Right.
really know every beat, where you're going, what's next. The instrument has to be set up. Really impressive. And then when I met your folks and they told me who you work for, I said, "You got to be kidding me. That's
That's
incredible."
awesome.
I
Thank
just
you.
started watching all his videos.
That's very cool. Yeah, so
That's
then the last piece of that was then I started doing the filming stuff. And I have experience doing video editing. My undergrad degree at Syracuse was actually television, radio, and film. So I had some experience doing editing just because it felt very musical.
Mhm.
Editing is almost like music production. There's beats and there's rhythm and that sort of thing. But I didn't have a whole lot of experience with filming. So that was sort of the last little test, I guess, that Mark threw my way, starting to film him.
I think that that's super exciting because you're part of a creative process. And it sounds like you do more than just the filming, but you help coordinate and
Right.
plan, and then you execute with the filming part. But I think it's great because those are really creative. I get jazzed just watching them. So I hope you're getting
Thanks.
excited making.
Totally. Yeah, I am. And I definitely remind myself to take a step back and not take it for granted because I feel super lucky to, like you said, be just part of the creative process and be on a team. It's like what I miss about being in a band, just contributing to a creative process. And I
Mhm.
feel lucky that I get to do it in this way.
And now, speaking of that, lately in the last 2 weeks, you and some of your buddies have been putting out videos very on the down low, covering songs with different musical styles, and those are amazing.
Don't let me, don't let me.
And
Thanks so much.
I encourage you to get a name, some kind of name for that group so you can promote that, because that I really enjoy those videos too. And all of those guys that I see
Yeah,
in the video are really excellent together. And
thanks a ton.
yeah, I think you should do more of that and
Y-
promote that. It's
You
really
and
good
I
stuff.
are we have similar thoughts there because I love hanging out with them, and it's sort of just like we're a bunch of guys who all became friends separately from different reasons, different things in Nashville, and we've just all started jamming with each other. And if some sort of band came out of that, I'd be super stoked. But the way that I'm looking at it right now is more like, do you know that band Scary Pockets?
I've heard of them.
It's basically like a collective, and they
Mhm.
put out a song every week, and it's a cover of a song, and it's always like a funk version. It's super cool. There's 2 guys who are at the core of it, but every week the musicians change, the singer changes, and it's sort of just the name is the only thing that stays the same. I can see that sort of thing happening with this group because there have been different people in each video popping in and out, but everybody lives near each other and everybody has similar sensibilities and like instincts when it comes to that 70s, 80s style of music, and we all like to jam together. So, yeah, we'll see what ends up happening. But I can see that sort of thing being like, this is the group name or the collective, and then people
Right.
come in and out.
Just for the next period of time. It doesn't have to be a long-term commitment, but
Totally.
it seems like something that you all are enjoying doing. You're good at it, and the world needs more music like that. That's really
Appreciate it.
fun to watch. So keep it.
I'm going to take that to them this week. I'll let them know.
When we put this out, we can show them this part.
Sounds good. Clip it.
What lessons have you learned about how to be a musician purely by your experience as an engineer slash producer?
Hmm.
Has it permeated back into growing you as a musician?
That's a great question. I would think definitely. And the way that it sort of comes out is by playing less. I think that when I was playing keys for the first time, playing groups, I was just like really excited to play. And then when you are producing a song, you sort of have to look more from a macro perspective.
Or-
And, you can't just have every single thing playing uh, the entire time. Things have to come in, things have to come out. There has to be a build, some sort of excitement. So I think that learning how to be a better producer has sort of helped me become a better keyboard player because I'm listening more maybe on stage because I want to serve the song and not just be playing all the time.
Sure. Does that lead to something like being a band leader? For example, I saw James Taylor last night.
Oh, how is that?
It was good. He's getting old and
Uh,
his voice isn't what it once was, but as I've said about most of the artists that I love who are all getting old, I'm going to take every chance I can to go see them and
totally.
appreciate it for whatever it is. And I'll layer in my own memories to make it as good as it can be. It was
Sure.
great. So it was
Nice.
great. It was noticeable that his voice has declined, but his charm is at 100%. He was amazing. He was funny, but he had a bass player. He normally tours with the immediate family band, those incredible players, Russ Kunkel and Lee Sklar and Danny Korchmar. And none of those guys were on the show last night. But the bass player he introduced as his musical director. And I thought,
Mhm.
gee, I wonder, I'm going to ask Scott about this. Does being a producer help you become a band leader on stage?
Yeah, I do think so, and it's funny that you bring that up because I was playing with a buddy of mine earlier this week, an artist named Jake Diamond, whose EP I've been producing over the last year, and it's us. He's playing guitar, I'm on keys, a drummer, and a bass player, and I am the person in the rehearsal space who's sort of like making the call, like I'm covering this guitar part on keys because Jake's doing this other rhythm part, and I do think that that role totally translates I also think it's a bit of a personality type.
Hmm.
And I try my hardest not to be overbearing or bossy in a space like that. However, I do think that just my personality, I sort of have that type A leadery vibe whenever it comes to creating. I don't know if I can just turn that off or not, but I think that it sort of is just a culmination of being a producer. So I think that being a producer definitely does translate to being a music director because you're sort of approaching things from that same like macro view.
Right. And my bands that I've been in, we don't have that because we're cover bands and a bunch of working people who get together once a week to rehearse and play a gig once a month. And we sorely needed a musical director because
Mm,
everyone would have an opinion and an idea, and they would be in conflict more often than I would have liked. And
sure.
it would have been so helpful. It helps for everyone to be working in the same direction. And so I would imagine being a producer does translate.
It totally does. It can be touchy because as a musician, I want my voice to be heard, and I also want all of my other bandmates to feel like that their voice can be heard. But to your point, I think that having somebody like an appointed person in place, if there needs to be a coin flip or if it's just going to be easier. But the biggest thing is, as somebody who has that proclivity to take charge, I never want people to feel like they can't express their opinion. So,
Right. I think that's what a good producer does too, is
yeah,
they express the best idea that they have for the song, but the artist still has to have a say as well.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's a nuance that you learn in the studio that I would imagine translates into band
Oh, yeah.
interdynamics.
And another thing about being in the studio as a producer with different artists is that when you're wearing that hat, you sort of have to be a different person for whoever is in the room with you.
Sure.
And I've found that depending on who I'm working with, sometimes I'm a friend. Sometimes I'm a little bit more of a therapist. Sometimes I'm just a total vehicle for someone's creativity and they don't know how to play something on keys and I'll play it for them. But
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of nuances. That's something that I don't think you can really learn in a university classroom, that you just have to learn by being in a bunch of sessions. However, I wish that there was a psychology of producing class
Hmm.
because there are, I'm sure, a lot of lessons that people could come in and talk about. I never had that class. I've just experienced things in studios, and I'm sure
Sure.
I'm going to experience a lot more in the years to come.
Yeah, right on. You live in Nashville. Do you get to go out and see a lot of great music?
I do. Yeah. That's one of the few recreational things that I do when I'm not working. And there's a ton of places that you could go. The place that I played at this past week was called The Basement. And I saw a show there over the weekend. It's just a classic Nashville spot. And the event that I played, it was called New Faces Night. And every Tuesday, it's a free admission. People who are new on the scene come there and play. And it's a great place to network if you're a band or if you're a producer, a drummer, just people who are looking to get involved in the music scene. So I think it's
Hmm.
really cool that Nashville has things like that, both for artists and for the community.
Hmm.
Um, and then I've played at like other dive bar spots. There's a place called the Underdog. But then there are some obviously like amazing arenas here, like Bridgestone. I saw
Right.
John Mayer there. I saw Stevie Nicks there.
Did you see
There's
Stevie Nicks just this past winter?
I did, yeah.
I saw her here in New York. She was great.
Cool. Yeah, it was super fun, and her stories that she told in between songs were awesome.
Agreed.
There's Nissan Stadium, which I haven't been to yet, but that's ginormous. And Ascend, which is like this outdoor amphitheater. I saw Brothers Osborne there. I missed Lake Street Dive there. I would have liked to have seen them.
I really like them.
Yeah, they're cool. I like their sound.
How are you doing with country music? Are you a fan?
I'm exposed to it a lot more in Nashville than I was up in the Northeast. I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm a fan, but I'm not a fan. I don't go out of my way to work on country music, but I wouldn't say no to it. It's not the music that I make, but if I happen to go out and I'm downtown and I'm around country music, I'm not going to have a bad time.
I mean, you are in the place where more great country musicians are than virtually anywhere in the world.
Totally. And honestly, I just probably haven't had a great education in country music yet. I'm sure
Mhm.
if somebody was like, listen to these 5 albums and I sat down with them, I'd find things that I love about all of them.
I've found that country music has become so pervasive that there are as many subgenres of country music as there are of rock.
Sure. Yeah.
It's become unto itself completely unwieldy. And so there are so many things that fall under country music, and they're so different from one another,
Yeah.
that you can enjoy some things and not enjoy others and be surprised by yet another group of things.
What I would say I have been exposed to more and I am a lot more into now as a result of being in Nashville is just like the folk Americana singer-songwriter thing. That's definitely big here. But I also feel like that's big everywhere. I think that's pretty popular right now with like the Noah Kahns and the Zach Bryans.
Who is the musician that you have seen the most live?
I've seen this band Lawrence play a bunch of times. They're sort of in that Lake Street Dive world. They're like soul pop, and my sister put me onto them in our junior or senior year of high school. My whole family loved them, and it was like the college band thing. They came out of Brown and just had this following, very small. And year after year, they never broke up. It's a brother sister act. Those are the two front people, and then all of their friends from growing up. It's a pretty big band. So that's it's been really cool. I think I've probably seen them 4 times. I don't think I've seen anybody up more than 4 times that I can think of. But it's been cool to see them because the first place I saw them was Irving Plaza in New York City, and then I saw them up in Syracuse at Funkin' Waffles, which is a small 300 person room, maybe a little bit bigger than that. They just opened for the Rolling Stones at MetLife Stadium.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they were opening for the Jonas Brothers on their arena tour, and they're like doing the thing now. So it's been very cool to be an early fan and see how they've totally blown up.
What's the most memorable concert you've ever seen?
Most recently, I got a chance to see Dead and Company at the Sphere with my dad, and that was a life altering concert experience.
Okay,
Um,
that's I was gonna get to that one way or the other, so I'm glad you brought it up.
yeah,
Was it life altering because you love the Grateful Dead or because the experience at the Sphere took it to just a whole nother level, or both?
both, but mostly the latter, because I think I understand the Dead more at this point in my life, and I probably will continue to more as I get older. But seeing their music tied in with the visuals and being in that space where you just know if you're at the Sphere seeing the Dead, you're a dedicated fan. The experience of being in the Sphere, it was just a totally singular experience, and it gave me this realization which made me a little sad at first, but I was excited just to be there. That like this is such a new thing to me, and I was like, oh man, as you get older, you don't get to experience that many new experiences. It was really cool to be there, and both my dad and I had never seen anything like that, so it was refreshing to experience a totally new thing.
Not that they're my favorite band, but I'm gonna go see the Eagles there just so I can go
Cool.
to the Sphere. That's the only thing that's playing there through the beginning of next year, so I think I'm just gonna bite the bullet.
I would be lying if I said I hadn't toyed around with figuring out how I would get back out there for the Eagles. I haven't figured it
Yeah, I
out
mean,
yet.
I am like The Big Lebowski. I'm not a huge Eagles fan, and I saw them a couple years ago and was kinda underwhelmed, but I
Yeah,
love Joe Walsh, and, I'm dying to go to the Sphere, so I'll take what I can get.
yeah, it'll be worth it.
Do you have any bucket list bands you wanna see? Is there a band that you're dying to see while they're still playing that you haven't seen before?
When I was out in Vegas with my dad, we saw Ringo Starr, which was great because now I've checked off the 2 Beatles who are alive.
So you've seen
Uh,
McCartney as
I
well?
I saw McCartney. I coincidentally happened to see McCartney twice in the same year, and that's the only time I've seen him. I saw him play at Desert Trip in 2016. That
Nice.
bill, it was McCartney, Rolling Stones, The Who, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, and Roger Waters, which
Yeah,
was nuts.
incredible. Yeah.
Uh, Dylan was a bit of a letdown, but it was still cool to see him.
That's the
Uh,
problem with Dylan is I've seen him a bunch and he can be on or off and it's one or the other. You don't get halfway. You get either a really good show or just horrible.
yeah, it was like black and white visuals, and he was kind of just like half singing. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
whatever. So I saw McCartney then, and then later that year, I started my freshman year at Syracuse, and McCartney played in the Carrier Dome. So
Mhm.
I got to see him. I was way up in the nosebleeds, but just to be in the dome for that was super cool. But bands that are playing that I haven't seen are Talking Heads still playing?
They're talking about reuniting, but they haven't committed to it yet. I never saw them. I would definitely go.
Yeah, that would be cool. But I've been super lucky that I've seen most of my favorite bands. I've seen Springsteen. I just saw Green Day for the first time this summer on their Saviors tour. And they played through all of Dookie and American Idiot,
Right.
and they sprinkled in a song or two from their new album. And it was funny every time they played a new song, like nobody knew the words. But I was like, all right, it's fine. You can have one because you're doing the entire
Right.
album.
One for you, five for me.
Exactly. I've been super lucky that I've seen so many of my favorite artists. I don't think I've seen James Taylor, so I would love to see James Taylor.
God, he is
Um,
such a great entertainer. I encourage you to find him if you can.
I don't have a real concrete answer for you for who what I want to see. I've been super lucky that I've gotten to see all these older legends. There are more current artists who I haven't seen yet. Like one of my favorite guitar players and producers, this guy named Tom Mish. He's this guy from South London, and I just really love his music and never had the opportunity to see him yet. So I'd love to see him. But I
That's
guess
why
that's
I do
one.
this podcast so other people can tell me what music I should be listening to that I haven't picked up on yet.
Check him out. Yeah, it's sort of
Mhm.
like neo soul, jazz influence, R&B. It's cool. Yeah.
That sounds great. And how about venues? Have you been to the Ryman yet, first of all?
I've been to the Ryman. Yep. For one show, I saw Sammy Ray and the Friends.
One of my daughter's favorite bands.
It was really fun. The energy in that room it was palpable. It's one of those spaces where you can feel the history, if that makes any
Mhm.
sense.
Oh, I've heard that multiple times. That is number one on my bucket list of venues that I want to go see a show at.
I would love to play at the Ryman. That's on the bucket list for me.
Where are you playing out next?
That's a good question. I don't think I have anything lined up. I guess the next thing that I'm gearing up for is Mark's fall run of shows.
Are you
But I'm
going to
not,
go out with them?
yeah, I'm going with him, but I'm not playing as a keyboard player. I'm going to be there more of like the tech side of things. So one of the jobs that I'm doing on the road is helping him with live playback. So it's basically just like he does all this live looping stuff in the studio, but in order to take that to the stage, there has to be systems in place that enable you to do that. So the
Mhm.
computer side stage is like running Ableton, which is recording software,
Mhm.
and there is basically like markers throughout the whole program. So it's like, okay, this bar opens up here and you can play guitar and then it stops recording. So one of the roles that I have is basically like facilitating the live playback on the
Cool.
road.
You're going to come to New York?
Yeah, he's doing shows at the Knitting Factory in October. I think the first shows are in South Bend, Indiana, and then Indianapolis.
Cool.
So yeah, I think those are the next things that it's September. I don't really have any keyboard gigs lined up, but hopefully that'll change within the next couple weeks or months. Who knows? Something could pop up.
Yeah. And what of the songs and music you've produced, what's coming out next? What should we look for?
Mm. That artist who I mentioned, Jake Diamond, his songs are in like the final mixing stages now. Not sure when he's releasing that, but my guess is it will probably be end of 2024 or early next year.
Cool.
And then that other artist who I was talking about, the Irish guy, his name is Oren Murphy. I think there's actually a song, I don't know when this podcast will come out, but a song that I produced for him comes out on September 6th. Yeah, couple projects here or there.
Yeah. And then I have just one last question and I'll let you go. I appreciate your time very
Of course.
much. What is it about live music that made you want to pursue music, the live aspect of it specifically? And has that changed now that you are pursuing it?
I think there's no greater feeling than being in a room in a shared space and everybody's experiencing the same thing and feeling the same music. And I guess I've been chasing that ever since I got to experience that for the first time as a musician. I love being in the audience too, but 9 out of 10 times, I want to be the person who's playing on the stage. And I'd say I'm still sort of chasing that. How has it changed since I've gotten into music? I guess the thing that's changed for me is just making an active effort to still enjoy it as much and remember the reason why I got into it because it's so cool and I like I said I don't take it for granted that I get to work in music, but it is a job now that I've turned my passion into. Every day I go to the studio, but I'm there to work. So the thing that's changed for me is just reminding myself of why I got into it because I don't want to lose that initial spark that I had, I guess.
Sounds good to me. Well, I love what you're doing, and I can't wait to see what you do next. And I'll be rooting for you the whole way. I'm going to let you go because I know you got to sacrifice for your art and you got to prepare to run it back for the next day.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And I look forward to continuing our conversation offline.
Likewise. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And that's it for today's conversation. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be back next Tuesday. And if you like what you heard today, we'd appreciate it if you would subscribe or follow to make sure you get notified about every new episode. And please tell your friends. Also, a reminder we release a playlist for every episode of the podcast. Look for the Rock and Roll Show podcast playlist on Spotify every week, featuring songs from the bands we mentioned during this episode. So check that out. Additionally, we want to know what you think. So please leave us a comment. We'll try to respond to every one of them. The Rock and Roll Show podcast is a World Highway Media production. I'm your host, Alex Gadd. And until next time, remember that life is short, so get those concert tickets.